We're assessing the performance of the Buffalo Bills coaching staff in 2024 today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, folks, welcome in. Today on the episode, we are going to focus in on assessing the Buffalo Bills coaching staff. We'll have conversations about Sean McDermott, Joe Brady, Bobby Babich, and Matthew Smiley. Talk about where they got it right and where they fell short in 2024. And folks, yesterday was a busy day on the podcast. We had two episodes. The first one was assessing and critiquing Brandon Beane and all the moves that he made to build the 2024 Buffalo Bills. But then with Myles Garrett requesting a trade from the Cleveland Browns, we had to do a bonus episode to really talk about the idea of the Bills pursuing Myles Garrett and a trade. So hopefully you enjoyed the double dip yesterday. We're back on track today with our assessment of this coaching staff. And let's start with the head coach, Sean McDermott. Can you believe he's been the head coach for 8 seasons? That's crazy, right? That's a lot longer of a tenure than we've been used to in Buffalo. And it's interesting because you really get a chance to see the evolution of a coach across that many seasons, right? You talk about the cast of characters that filled up the previous 20 years, and it's, 2-3 years at a time. And it's interesting to be in this position where you get to really assess a bigger sample size to really get to know a coach and assess and appreciate in some ways their evolution. But 2024 was a bit of a different season for the Bills. In some ways, it felt exactly like the previous several years, but in a lot of ways, it was different. And it's different in that the roster transition was real. And for the first time in several years, the Bills weren't the Super Bowl favorites or the team that a lot of people were picking to go win the whole thing. They had a chance to be a bit of an underdog. And when you say goodbye to Stephon Diggs and Tre'Davious White and Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde and Mitch Morse and Gabe Davis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that's going to change the perspective, at least from the national media perspective. And even myself, my expectations for this team going into the year was, I think they'll win 10 or 11 games. It's probably good enough to win the East, probably get to the divisional round, and then we'll see. And they wind up going 13-4, comfortably win the division, and of course, go to the AFC Championship game and fall short to the Kansas City Chiefs after a playoff run that included a convincing win over the Broncos. Then you beat the Ravens, and of course, that's a quality playoff win, folks. And then you go to Arrowhead and don't play your best, but you still have a great chance to win the game. And so that's where the season ends. And this is kind of my prevailing thought for Sean McDermott this year. I think he had the right overall formula for this team based on what this roster did and did not have. The formula offensively was efficiency and taking care of the football. Obviously, you didn't have your superstar wide receiver, Stephon Diggs. It was very much in the passing game, everybody eats. And so you are working in a new wide receiver core. You're trying to figure out these tight ends. You got a bunch of running backs that can catch the football. And the Bills leaned into efficiency on offense and taking care of the football. Defensively, I think personnel-wise, they were just not necessarily the caliber of roster they've been defensively. And relying on big plays and positioning the defense to get big plays and take away the football, I think that combined with the efficiency in taking care of the football was the right formula for this team. And obviously they went pretty freaking far, right? I mean, they lost by 3 in the AFC Championship game. I think you also saw a different Sean McDermott this year, and I kind of teased this already. He continues to evolve. You saw a lot more personality from Sean McDermott. I mean, the guy's doing snow angels with Josh Allen after a game. I mean, that's stunning, but it's probably something that signals exactly the evolution. You hear about the dad jokes and just a lot more personality, the demeanor. Everything was a bit different with Sean McDermott this year. There was a looseness about him, and I think a lot of people appreciated that. One thing that Sean McDermott said several times throughout the course of the year, and in a lot of times in those like interviews that he would do with like CBS or whatever, if they were going to be the game of the week and they'll talk to Bill Cowher or whatever. And he talked about his approach being asking himself the question, who does he need to be for the team this week? What head coach does Josh Allen need this week? What personality? Who does Sean McDermott need to be for the team this week? And I think that's an interesting viewpoint, and I think it speaks to servant leadership. And I'm not going to get on a leadership rant, but great leaders are servants first. And I think him embracing that mindset of who do I need to be for the team this week was a big part of coming out of his shell a little bit and showcasing the different personality and vibes that he illustrated throughout the course of the season. I think Sean McDermott obviously had a great season with fourth down decisions. He had the most win probability added of any coach in the league on fourth down decisions. The idea that Sean McDermott is not aggressive is just obviously not true. He is an aggressive coach. And again, added the most win probability of any coach in the league this year with fourth down decisions. So there's a lot of good. Obviously, the team had a good season. He had the right recipe, transitional year, and had a lot of success. But I think there are a couple of things that stand out to me with Sean McDermott that need to improve. And this season in particular, the team did not start fast enough in games. I'll explain that a little bit more especially when I get to Bobby Babich and Joe Brady. But in the NFL, between 75 and 85% of the time, the team that is leading at halftime wins the game. And the variance year to year is just, look, sometimes it might be 75. We've seen some years it's 82%, but that's a pretty convincing, more than 75% of the time, the team that is leading at halftime wins the game. And the Bills didn't lose many games. They lost 3 games. I'm not counting week 18. They lost 3 games. Texans, Ravens, Rams, and of course, then the 4th game would be the AFC Championship game. And every single one of those games, the Bills were trailing at halftime and didn't start fast and actually were in multiple score deficits in the first half. And so he's got to get his team to come out and play better early to give themselves a better chance of winning football games. I think that's a metric that they need to cling to. I know that there's been a huge emphasis in giveaways and takeaways and turnovers, right? That's huge. I think that's a great thing to emphasize. I think your next thing to emphasize is starting faster to give yourself better chances of not having hiccups. And again, we're talking about very few hiccups. And they've certainly been able to overcome halftime deficits against lesser teams. But this Bills team obviously has big goals, and you got to find advantages in the margins. And I think that's something that they could certainly embrace. And the other thing to highlight is no surprise. It's the Chiefs' riddle in the playoffs. They've obviously been close. An overtime loss, 2 3-point losses Those are the last three. They're very close. But you haven't been able to have the breakthrough. And look, I understand, and I've said this a million times, it's one team, it's the Chiefs. It's unfortunate that they exist at the current time that they do in the form that they are. But the Bills are going to come up empty until they can get past Kansas City. And so whatever you have to figure out for this Chiefs riddle, you got to, or else it's going to be successful but disappointing. And here's the deal. Like, if Sean McDermott and this Bills team have the breakthrough, the legacy conversation with Sean McDermott really cranks up. He's had a heck of a run in Buffalo. This year, he became the 5th coach in NFL history with 5 straight 11-win seasons, joining Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, Tony Dungy, and Tom Landry. That's not nothing. The Bills became the first team ever to defeat 2 15-plus win teams in a single season, beat them both by 2 scores. Sean McDermott ranks 2nd all-time in regular season wins in a head coach's first 8 NFL seasons. He's on one heck of a path. He's won at least one playoff game in 5 straight years. There's a lot of good. You have the breakthrough, you do this thing, and all of a sudden, the conversations about Sean McDermott become very different, and I think he starts to be looked at as a Tony Dungy type coach, or Sean Payton or whatever, one of those coaches that you get that Super Bowl on the resume, and it's a big deal. It goes from, man, he has a great quarterback and they're close, to, oh my goodness, this is one of the better coaches in this era of football. But you got to have the breakthrough in order to earn that conversation. All right, we're talking Joe Brady on the other side of it. What he got right, where he missed, and more. Folks, be sure to stick with me. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you are cashing out. This week, I'm looking at the board and selecting more for Travis Kelce on receiving yards and more for Patrick Mahomes passing yards. What I love most about Prize Picks, fast, safe, secure withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. Also, check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Time to talk some Joe Brady here. Bills offensive coordinator, first full year on the job, obviously took over, was it week 11 in 2023? Obviously had an offseason to put his fingerprints on this offense and performed really well. This season, the Bills were 2nd in scoring, 30.8 points per game, 3rd in EPA per pass, 2nd in EPA per run. They scored on 49.7% of drives. That's 3rd best in the league. 44% on 3rd downs. That's 7th best. And 72% scoring touchdowns in the red zone. That's 2nd best. That's a lot of good. And when you think about what Joe Brady got right, you're talking about the most prolific scoring offense in the history of the Buffalo Bills. The most points, the most touchdowns in a season in franchise history. The first team in NFL history to have 30 rushing and 30 passing touchdowns in the same season. What is the job of an offense? To score. And they did. And they scored, both throwing it and running it. There's a good story to tell with this offense, especially when you consider the transitional elements at the wide receiver position. and it being Joe Brady's first full year on the job. So what did they get right? They scored, and they moved the football, and they were efficient, and they converted third downs, and they scored in the red zone. All of that is what offenses are supposed to do. And they also took care of the football. An unbelievable job. From Josh Allen is a turnover machine to literally the greatest season a quarterback has ever had in taking care of the football. Ever. Should be a bigger story than it is. Boy, was it a story when Josh Allen was turning over the football, even if a lot of those turnovers were meaningless. People couldn't wait to talk about that. But he goes out and has the greatest season in NFL history of taking care of the football. Oh, that's cool. What a great turnaround. A little golf clap for Josh Allen. Come on now. Only 4.2% of plays resulted in a sack, fumble, or interception. The lowest in NFL history. That is remarkable. Remarkable. Didn't just get better. Completely shattered the narrative. Should be a bigger story than it is, folks. So that's obviously something that Joe Brady got right. How about these running backs? James Cook had a heck of a year, and I thought not only was the production excellent, but the way he played. I think he got so much better. The fumbles, the drops, the inconsistent physicality wasn't a thing this year. Vision, cutback ability, all of it was just at an elevated level. And for Joe Brady to not only get James Cook going in a meaningful capacity, but Ray Davis and Ty Johnson, all meaningful parts of this offense, was really cool to see. You watch the Bills offense in years past, whether that's under Brian Daboll or Ken Dorsey, they struggled to get more than one back going, right? You got three going. It's cool to see. So there's a lot of good, plenty of great stories to tell here when it comes to this Bills offense. There is one major black eye, in my opinion, on where this offense missed the mark. And it's the deep passing game. It's the vertical passing game. The Bills' vertical passing game was not good. Let me give you some metrics. And when I say vertical passing game, I mean throws that are 20 yards or more down the field. So from the line of scrimmage to the target, 20 air yards. This season, the Bills completed 30% of those passes. That's 24th in the league. 9.74 yards per attempt. That's 26th. Only 2 touchdown passes on deep throws. That's 31st. Passer rating of 65.5. That's 28th. A catchable throw rate of 46.6%. That's 25th. And an EPA of plus 0.19, which is 20th. Those metrics are terrible. And when you have that run game, and when Josh Allen's your quarterback, you're going to get opportunities and looks to throw the ball down the field. So it's not just, oh my gosh, they played 2 high safeties or they played quarters coverage and said, no, there's no way you're going to be able to throw the ball deep. That's not true. The looks were there. In fact, what's even more disappointing than the numbers and what they turned out to be was the frequency. Despite these metrics being terrible, the Bills threw it deep all the time. 5th highest percentage of throws that were 20 yards or more down the field. 14.1% of all Josh Allen dropbacks were targeted 20 yards or more down the field. So you didn't do it well, but you did it a lot. It's not a good recipe. And I do look at this Bills personnel situation and feel like there's not a lot of vertical receiving talent. And I can accept that. But then don't throw the ball deep, the fifth most of any team in the NFL if you don't have the personnel to do it. They need a field stretcher. They need somebody that can stretch the field, not just a jump ball specialist down the field. Somebody that can run away from coverage. And so that recipe of poor results but high frequency combined with not necessarily having the personnel to do it, that you missed the mark. You missed the mark. And I'm going to unpack this a lot more in the Herd Mentality Substack. We just did an article this past Monday talking about the release repercussions of every single player on the roster. And I went through and I highlighted who the most logical players were. And then, of course, I know there's a lot of names like Milano or Knox or Curtis Samuel where people are interested in, could the Bills get out of the deal? And I kind of showed exactly how that doesn't really make sense. Coming up this week, I'm going to do a deep dive on Dalton Kincaid. I'm going to do a deep dive on the vertical passing offense and on Keon Coleman. That'll be probably my next three publishes. So midweek, end of week, and then one probably early next week where I'll really break that down and show a lot of data, show a lot of film clips. So check that out. Encourage you to be part of the Herd Mentality Substack. It's going to be a busy offseason there where I can really flesh out some deep dive stuff where I can show stuff and really put data there that's not necessarily the most conducive for an audio podcast. So excited for you to be able to check that out. If you'd like to check out the Herd Mentality Substack, there's a link in today's show notes that'll take you right to it, and you can see everything that is available. Plus, that gets you into our Discord channel where we've got 1,500 Bills fans in there talking Bills and all kinds of things all the time. So check that out. There's a link in today's show notes. So a lot of good with this Bills offense, a lot of good. But that vertical passing game is something that has bothered me all season long, and there's just not a great story to tell. Now, I will say that it finished on a high mark. The last 3 or 4 games, Josh Allen's numbers throwing deep were excellent. And hopefully that carries into 2025, but the overall story was not a good one when it comes to the deep passing game. All right, coming up on the other side of it, some tough conversations for Bobby Babich and Matthew Smiley. Folks, be sure to stick with me. Looking for tickets to your next big event, maybe last-minute tickets to the big game? Well, maybe that's a concert, maybe a comedy show, or a different sporting event. Finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache, but with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Game Time Picks for a while now, and here's why I love it. First of all, the curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat, and I couldn't believe the value. It was a steal. The Seat View feature is also a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like at the venue. It is so reassuring. But the best part, you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, let's talk Bobby Babich and then Matthew Smiley to close things out. Bobby Babich, first year on the job as the defensive coordinator. Of course, long-time Sean McDermott disciple, gets a chance to be the coordinator and the play caller. The Bills defense allowed 21.6 points per game. That's 11th in the NFL. 23rd in EPA per pass. 4th in EPA per run. 36.3% score percentage. That's 22nd. 44% third down conversion rate. That's 29th, 2-9. 57% in the red zone. That's 16th. What did Bobby Babich get right? Let's start there. Well, takeaways, right? This team was very good at taking away the football, and that's huge. That's a great thing to be good at. 17.5% of drives against the Bills defense resulted in a takeaway. Number 1 in the league. We love that. taking away the football was a big part of why this Bills team had the year that they did. So that's number one, what he got right. And I do think that there is credit deserving of the coaching staff because, as Bobby Babich has said, you get what you emphasize. And if you watch this Bills team practice, it's all about the ball and taking it away. And I think that it is definitely a coaching emphasis. And so there is a credit that I do attribute to the coaching staff. It's not just random. I thought Bobby Babich did a good job with second half adjustments. Now, there's also a criticism here because obviously they started very poorly, very frequently. Looking at EPA per play on defense, in the first quarter, the Bills were 29th. In the second quarter, they were 21st. That's terrible, right? I mean, that's not good. In the third quarter, here it is, drum roll, first. The best third quarter defense in the league. And then in the fourth quarter, middle of the pack at 16th. So, great job adjusting at halftime. Obviously, we got to get better earlier in games. Going back to what I talked about at the beginning. And this is going to be a theme, something I talk a lot about this year. Starting faster. 75 to 85% of the time, the team that is leading at halftime wins the game. Give yourself a better chance. Play better earlier in games. I enjoyed Bobby Babich's usage of personnel groupings on defense. It's probably the most diverse defense that I've seen in Buffalo. Being able to use, of course, nickel, right? That's what they want to be in. But the dime package, that was a big shift. Built on what they did last year, but it was a big part of their defense, and I think that's good. They had that odd mirror look where it's like a 3-2-6. I think you saw some diversity with personnel groupings, which I like that. I think the Bills being willing to match personnel a little bit more is helpful. So I like that. And I do think that there's some grace that's needed to be given due to the injuries because they were very persistent. Daquan Jones, Greg Rousseau, your only two starters on defense that didn't miss a game due to injury. I mean, right off the bat, Taron Johnson injured against Arizona, misses multiple weeks. Then Terrell Bernard has his injury as well early in the season. And so it's kind of a tough formula where you're trying to, really execute a revamped defense with a new play caller, a lot of new personnel, and literally you're probably your two most important players on defense, Taron Johnson and Terrell Bernard, injured right off the bat, not to mention Matt Milano being out. And then later in the season, your safeties, DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp missed multiple games. The defense really kind of takes a step back when those guys aren't available. Russell Douglas missed some time. So, yeah, they definitely had to battle through and coach through a lot of injury issues. But where did this defense miss the mark? I don't have a long list, but the things on this list are very, very meaningful. This defense was terrible in situational moments. Third downs in red zones. The Bills were 29th in third down defense. That's terrible. 29th. And of course, they were middle of the pack in red zone, 57%. But obviously, the third down defense is a story here. And not only third downs, just generally gaining a first down. The Bills conceded 356 first downs. That's the fourth most in the NFL. It's a wonder this team got as far as they did, being that bad. Can't get stops. Can't get stops. So we went into this big rant in the first or the second segment about offense, and the whole point is to score points. The whole point on defense is to get stops. They didn't get enough stops. Boy, they were not good at that. So they weren't good at the thing that they're supposed to be good at. The whole purpose of defense, get stops. Couldn't do it. 29th in fourth and third down defense. He gave up the fourth most first downs in the league. Imagine how much more robust the offensive production would have been if they got the ball back a little bit more. And I think at the root of this is just pass defense. Pass defense was poor. The coverage, not consistent. Pass rush, The Bills were 20th in sack rate, 11th in pressure rate. 11th in pressure rate's fine. But it's timeliness of that. It's marrying the coverage with the rush. It's working in your pressure packages more effectively. It was not very consistent. So, yeah, I mean, great job taking away the football. Good job with second half adjustments. We like the personnel diversity. Good job working through injuries. But at the end of the day, you just couldn't get stops. And you really struggled to defend the pass. 23rd. 23rd in EPA per pass. It's not good enough. Matthew Smiley going to continue as a special teams coordinator. And that's not an easy decision to understand. It's hard to reconcile that because you have 2 seasons in a row of just not good enough special teams. Let me give you some numbers here that very easily tell the story. Tyler Bass, 83%. And look, I think the good news about Tyler Bass is this team didn't have any less success because Tyler Bass was the kicker, right? They won exactly. There's nothing about Tyler Bass's season that took away from where they ultimately got to. And of course, the game winner against Miami was one heck of a moment, 61 yards. But 83% making field goals, that's 22nd in the league. Sam Martin, 25th in EPA per punt. Punt return average was good. The Bills, Brandon Codrington had a good season, 11.6 yards per return. That's 8th best in the league. Kick return average for the Bills, 25.9 yards per return. That's 26th. Punt return against, 9.3 yards per punt return against. That's 16th. Kick return against, 30.8. That's 28th. So let me just sum this up. Buffalo was bottom 10 in the NFL. And kick return average, opponent kick return average, EPA per punt, and field goal percentage. The only components of the special teams that were league average or better was punt return average and opponent punt return average, which was right at number 16. Bottom 10, field goal percentage, EPA per punt, opponent kick return average, and kick return average. What are we doing? What are we doing here? It's back-to-back years of literally bottom 5 special teams production. And look, you'll always have 2022 where it was the number 1 special teams unit in the NFL, but that feels like 100 years ago. Back-to-back years. And so obviously, like I said, in reflecting on this decision last week when I did the podcast recapping the year-end press conferences when Sean McDermott committed to Matthew Smiley being back in 2025, he better be right. We cannot sit here next year at this time and have a similar conversation because that's exactly what we did. We had the exact same conversation that we did about 2023. And I went back to my notes for last year's special teams review. And what I wrote down was, all right, you have 1 year of literally the best. You have 1 year of towards the worst. 2024 will be the year that kind of defines and tells us who you are. And if it's like it was in 2023, then you got to move on. And it was, and here we are. So, boy, oh boy, Sean McDermott, you stuck your neck out for this guy. You better be right. You better be right. All right, folks, there you have it. Coaching staff review in the books. Hopefully you found this conversation to be insightful. And looking forward to more conversations this week. We got more things to review. Herd mentality. So much content. So much. I like I said yesterday, I went through and I kind of mapped out the next several months on the podcast, and there's so much to get into. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.